Today, we're going to be talking about how accounting firms like yours hire and keep the best talent in the Philippines and avoid common outsourcing catastrophes by skipping the middleman and hiring the most talented accountants directly. Oh, Marcy, hi. Thank you for saying that the chat is disabled. Let me see. Show chat previews. I got to be honest, I've done this is my first webinar given through Zoom. I came into the I was playing with the settings yesterday. I thought it had it figured all out, but apparently not. Um, so I guess we can use the Q&A. So as Marcy has shown us, if you put a question in the Q&A, I will see it. Also, we have a poll, and I've seen that some of you have filled it out. So if you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and let us know. We have a few questions there to help us get to know you. So I'm going to double check. Can you all hear me all right? Hear me and see the screen? I'm going to assume so. So who am I? My name is Isaac. I'm going to just breeze over this. Thank you for, I see we have, yes, we can hear you, you can hear me. Good. So my name is Isaac. You probably know that already. I'm a founder of Summit E-commerce Advisors, and we do bookkeeping for e-commerce companies. This is our team in the Philippines about a year and a half ago. We had a great retreat. I'm also the founder of Team Up, and we recruit the best accounting talent in the Philippines for firms like yours. All right. So today we have a lot to go through, and we're going to go over a little bit of time because I was a little late. Sorry about that, guys. Hope that's all right with you. So we have a lot to go through, and this is going to be hopefully very informational. If at any point you have questions, just pop them in, and I'm happy to answer them as we go through. If it'll take a longer answer, I may save it for the end. But just briefly, here's what we have to go over. Some of this I will just briefly describe, and we'll get into the details more than some of the overview stuff. So we'll talk about the catastrophes, the things that you hear other people saying has gone wrong when they try outsourcing. We're going to talk about the solution, which is hiring directly, how to do it, how to find people, how to pay them, all that stuff. Some of the challenges that come with this way of building your teams. I've also got a cost calculator, which is a free tool that I'll give you. I'll show you that in a few minutes. And then I'll tell you how we can work together if that's something that sounds good to you. And of course, lots of by the way, I don't have anything else after this. I can stay as long as you want to ask questions. We'll have lots of Q&A. So let's start with a definition. This is going to be important for this discussion today. What is a BPO? Some people do know, some people don't. This is stands for business process outsourcing. This is a company in the Philippines that you work with, and basically they hire the staff, put them on their payroll, and you essentially lease the staff from them. They usually have offices over there, usually provide desks and equipment, and they usually have some management layer between you and the staff. Everyone, like every business is different, of course, and so they all have a slightly different take on the model. Sometimes you have contact directly with the staff, other times you don't, and you just have contact with an account rep. Sometimes it feels like they're your staff, and sometimes you can train them your way. There's like lots of shades of gray in here, but the main thing is, in all cases, they are employing the staff, and you are kind of leasing them through you. And almost all of them share a lot of the common problems. And we're going to talk about these catastrophes. So I'm just going to assume that you've heard some scary stories and just label a few of the most common or the biggest problems that I've seen. One is what I call the B team switcheroo. That's when you start working with an agency and everything's going great. And then suddenly you start seeing problems, they pile up, and eventually you find out, oh, they have switched you over to their B team without telling you. That can cause huge disasters. I've heard that story before. Another, maybe the most common issue is the talent ceiling. And that is, that you can get okay or adequate work, but it's just requires so much review, revisions, and you just end up not being able to pull yourself out of that review and management layer. Another issue is unending turnover. You might work with somebody well for 6 months or 9 months, and then they get replaced because who knows what reason. The biggest one, though, and the one I hear the least about, people I think have the least awareness of, and that's the exit clause. So, one thing that most people are not aware of is that all these BPOs will have a contract with the staff. It's a separate one from the one that you see, and you are not allowed to see that contract. And it has all kinds of things in there that keep people locked in and dictate what they can do after, if they were to quit, they're not allowed to go work for you directly. There are all kinds of legal and financial penalties. Whether they're enforceable or not, it scares the crap out of people. So these are issues. And so then what is the solution? Well, first, let's get to why do these problems happen? First and foremost, it's not your team, right? And because of that, you don't have control over their internal policies. Um, and you often can't train the way you want. And it's really, really hard to build your own culture when it's not your team. This is a quote from Lala on my staff, who some of you know, some of you have worked with her. Um, I poached her from one of these BPOs. She's amazing. It doesn't, I'm not a huge fan of most BPOs, but it doesn't mean that some of them don't do good work, right? But it's just the model that I think causes a lot of problems. And she says it's very obvious to her and the staff that works there. There's a very heavy line between the staff and the firm that they work with. So, what is the solution? Well, you're here. You must know. I think it's hiring direct. Hire a person, not a company. Provide opportunity for growth. Train your way. Infuse your team with your own culture. Build one-to-one relationships and retain great talent for the long term. I mean, when you say it like that, it's kind of obvious, isn't it? But I think a lot of people have the following question, which is, okay, great, but how? Right? Raise your hand if you're with me so far, or if you have any questions, anything that you want me to address at some point today. So yeah, great, but how do you do this? And before we get into all of that, I want to set some context for just this conversation. And I have to tell a short story here. So this was a photo I took at QuickBooks Connect a few weeks ago. I went to an offshoring panel. It was a great discussion. And this guy over here in the red shirt is Matthew May. He's one of the owners of Acuity Accounting. They are a pretty large firm. They have 130 people or something like that. And they have 35 plus in the Philippines. And he said when they first started, quote unquote, outsourcing or offshoring or whatever it is that he's calling it, um, he said it was so confusing. He didn't understand how it all worked. And he saw outsourcing to these people in the Philippines as like this big black box. Information went in there, work came out of it, but he just had no understanding, just couldn't wrap his head around it. And then he went there and he met with the team. He went and had meals with them. They went out at night, had a great time. And he said he realized, oh, it's just people, right? And he even admitted, like, that sounds really dumb. Like, obviously, right? But you know, and that goes to something that I often talk about, which is I think we overcomplicate this. Hiring internationally, we think about countries and regulations and mechanics and all this stuff when really, 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 it's just people. They have hopes, dreams, desires. They want the best for their families, just like you and me. Um, so I think that's important for what we're going to be talking about today. So how do you do it? Well, you find the right person. So let's talk about who the right person would be. Um, you want to find someone, of course, with the right skills and the right experience, but critically, you also want to find someone with the right attitude, who's the right fit for your firm. And these two, I think, for some reason, especially accountants, I'm not sure why, often get forgotten about. And so we find people who are able to do the work, but is just not a good fit. And those people, they last 6 or 9 months and then leave for whatever reason, or you have to fire them, or just because they have maybe a bad attitude. I can train people on skills, but I cannot train someone to have the right attitude. I mean, it's obvious when you say it that way, but sometimes it's hard to remember sometimes. So whatever you do not compromise on attitude and fit. All right. Lior has a question. I see this is being recorded. Will you be sharing this webinar after the fact? May not be able to stay the whole time. Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Um, I'll go ahead and I'm going to send an email out following up with all of you with a couple of things, and I'll also include the link. So how do you find the right person? Well, I'm going to oversimplify. You just need a strong recruiting process. And today's discussion is not going to be over the recruiting process itself. It's going to be over getting the right people, getting a good fit, training and retaining. So that would have to be for another day. I'll just simplify it and say you can either do it yourself, or you can work with a recruiting partner like Team Up. So let's get into the nitty-gritty details. Has everybody filled out the poll? So it looks like we have half of you said yes, you do have an offshore team. The half, but so half of you, meaning 4 people. We got 4 awesome people in here. The 2 of you who do have more than 10 people, and they're all in the Philippines. Very cool. So let's get into the details. How do you hire this person? We'll talk about mechanics and structure. There are a couple of options. You can hire as a contractor, and that would just be as it sounds, paid directly through some payment platform like Wise or Payoneer. There are a whole bunch of these. We prefer Wise. Wise is great, and we found that they're just the easiest, the fastest, and cheapest. I mean, how can you beat that, right? And the other thing you can do is if you pay, I think it's $30 to $35, they will give you a US bank routing and account number so that you can fund your account there without paying additional fees, transfer fees. So that's nice. But is this legal? I know some of you may be thinking this. We're going to get to that in a minute. The other way you can hire people is through an employer of record. Now, this is going to sound kind of similar to a BPO. It's a bit different. This is a company registered in the Philippines that employs the staff, and then you have a contract with them. The difference between this and the BPO would be they serve at your discretion, right? So if you don't like them, you can say, screw you guys, I'm going over here, and I'm going to use a different provider. There are a couple other differences. One is they ideally these people would only provide payroll and compliance. So you'll see that there are a lot of companies, and every company is a bit different. Some might offer different HR services as well. But back to this question, is this legal? You guys are accountants, right? This stuff is on your mind. So here's the thing. Of course, I'm not here to provide legal advice. I can tell you my opinion. And I've been working with people overseas and in the Philippines for going on 10 years now. So I I have a rather, I would say, well-informed opinion. And yes, of course it's legal. Yeah, it's totally legal to be a contractor in the Philippines. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, and it's actually quite desirable for people over there because they see it as breaking free. And I'm just going to embellish, breaking free from the shackles of the BPOs, right? And so to them, that means going and building a direct relationship with people like you, and they see that as being a contractor. So we could talk a lot more about the details of this and why some people might want to use an employer of record. To be frank, I'm somewhat agnostic on this question. Um, it's not a service that we provide. We can make referrals. Um, but either way, some people come and tell me I want to use an employer of record. Other people come and tell me I want to hire as a contractor. Either way is fine. The next question I often get is about computers and IT security. So what do you do, right? Because if you work with a BPO, I mean, I'll be honest, it's a convenience that this is sorted out for you. So what do you do when you go direct? Well, you have a few options, and I have a couple favorite sayings, and one of them is there's no one right answer for everybody. There's just what works for you, your firm, and your staff. So, um, there are a few options here. One is the staff can use their personal computers. And when I say that, sometimes people look at me through the Zoom call in horror and say, oh my gosh, we can't do that. That's terrible. Okay. Then there are a couple of other options for you, but probably half of the accounting firms that we work with have them use personal computers. Another thing you can do is provide a computer. And the easiest way of doing that would be to have them go buy one and then reimburse them. Pretty simple. Another option, which is the probably on the most secure end of the spectrum, is you can have a server in your office or in the cloud that they log into. One way of doing this is having them remote using a remote desktop software to remote log into a computer in your office. And so that way, no information ever leaves your actual office. So a few options. By the way, I'm going to pause here for a second. Does anybody have any questions about this or anything that we've covered so far? Go ahead and just pop it into the Q&A section. All right. So, on the IT question, I know a lot of you have IT providers that you work with already. They can help set up computers and set this all up. If you don't have someone, or if the person you're working with doesn't really get the remote overseas environment, we have a recommended provider that's the number 4 accountants, and they specialize in IT for remote accounting firms. That's all they do. So that's a good solution. Let's talk about costs. And so you're probably going to want to compare the costs of hiring through a BPO. What are you going to pay them versus what are you going to pay an accountant directly? So here are some numbers for you. So a couple of things to note on this. When we're talking about years of experience, we're talking about just years working with US or Australian, um, or yeah, US or Australian primarily companies. They will probably have some experience in addition to this. So you can see these numbers. I'm not going to read all of them out, but you can see on the low end, it starts at 725, and this is dollars per month as an expected salary. By the way, can you guys tell me just put in the Q&A? I'm curious where you guys are all joining us from. Do we have any Australians in the audience? We've had a few people pop in since I last checked in with you guys. And on the high end, 2150. The most I've ever heard anybody ask for is about 3,000 US dollars a month. And this lady had an MBA, she was a CPA, she was doing all kinds of tax stuff, managing a team of 8. It's unbelievable. And so I know a lot of you may have the question of, well, is this really real? Is that a reasonable salary? $725 a month, right? Like my groceries cost more than that. And yeah, I'll tell you just for some context, in Manila, an average accountant with, say, 3 years of experience, working at a Philippines firm, that person's salary is on average $400 to $500 a month, which is crazy. But that's common and it's solidly middle class. So if you're thinking like 725, that's low. Um, that's already with like 1.5 timesing their current salaries up for the most for the most part. Kind of amazing. So to compare that to BPO fees, I have a calculator that I'll send you. I'll send you all an email after this, and it'll have a link to this spreadsheet that we created to put in the costs of hiring someone directly, working through us, what our price is compared with BPO fees, and you can sort of like add all these things up. And if you get a quote from a BPO, you can put that in here and see like, because it might cost more to hire directly initially, but then you're going to be paying more every month. And so how long does it take you to recoup those costs? So I hope that's interesting to you. But just a little note on BPO fees. I don't, it's not usually very transparent, but the BPO takes usually on average between 40 to 70% of what you pay them. And so that means that you can double what somebody makes, double somebody's salary without increasing your costs, as just a comparison between hiring it with a BPO or hiring direct. And just a little note on that, what do you think that does, right? That allows you to hire higher level people, right? So we're talking, let's get into some of the pitfalls. Are there any questions at this point? We've talked about a bunch of things: salaries, costs, um, hiring as a contractor versus employer of record. Um, any questions? Go ahead and just pop it in the Q&A section. Oh, Lior says Canada. Yes. Hey, Lior. Good to see you here. Where the rest of you, where are you joining us from? All right. So some of the common pitfalls to watch out for. First and foremost, we should talk about cultural differences. So Filipinos share a lot of cultural aspects with us Westerners in the US, Canada, Australia, wherever, as compared with other people from other Asian countries. Um, but of course, there are still some differences, and these you should be aware of. Let's talk about how these differences can show up, how you might see these in the day to day. Now, I would love to hear. Please comment and let me know if you have experienced any of these or any others that I haven't put here. that would be interesting to talk about. So they might call you sir or ma'am. And I got to tell you, that irritates me. Um, they may say yes when you give them a task and ask them if they understand, but not actually understand. And so this is probably the most common thing that I hear, which is you'll give them, yeah, give them a task, explain it, say, do you understand this? They'll smile and say yes. And then you'll check in with them the next day, say how things, ask how things are going, and they'll say, oh, I haven't started. And you're like, why? What's wrong? And they say, oh, well, I didn't understand. And you're like, wait a minute. I'm confused. I thought you told me you understood, right? A lot of those stories. Other ways this can show up is they may not want to challenge you if you have a bad idea or you say something just totally incorrect. They may not want to tell you bad news if there's a problem. They may sit and wait and be told what to do rather than figuring out what to do on their own. And this is sounding a little bad, sounding scary at this point. I'm not going to lie, right? Um, they may expect you to pick up on subtle hints rather than telling you directly. And worst of all, they may suddenly quit without warning. And so you're going, oh my gosh, this sounds horrible. I'm never hiring in the Philippines, right? Well, let's take a minute to understand this. Why would these things happen? Some of the differences here are communication styles between Western and Eastern cultures, direct versus indirect. We Westerners tend to be very direct. I'll be nice, but I'm going to tell you if there's a problem, right? Versus indirect, where they would maybe rather drop hints or have somebody else tell you, or rather than you tell them directly, maybe you would tell a manager and the manager tells them, because that might be horribly embarrassing if the boss told them they were doing something wrong. And that takes me to my next point, which is hierarchy and respect. Hierarchy is very important in Filipino working culture. And the boss is to be respected and revered and never questioned, and you just do it. You always say yes. It would be disrespectful to say no. As well as face. We've all heard of saving face, right? And that basically comes down to, my Western interpretation is not wanting to be embarrassed or humiliated, or, they want to retain their own, I guess, self-esteem. And so it's really important not to publicly shame people. That sounds bad, but like little comments can be bordering on that. And so for these three reasons are why all of the you might experience all of these things. So now let's take it to like, well, what do you do about that? Now we see it, we understand it. What do we do? So let's talk about navigating the differences. And this is I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but just hire the right person in the first place. Right? As we all know, generalizations don't apply to everyone and not equally. Some people are just more comfortable with Western practices and communication styles. Um, so, any questions on this? I would love to hear your experiences. There's a Q&A box. Type it in there. For some reason, the chat is disabled. I'm sorry. I don't know how to enable that. Um, oh, attendees can chat with everyone. Okay, maybe the chat will work. You want to go ahead and give that a shot? Somebody open up the chat box and type something in there. Say hello. Um, yeah, so I'd love to take your questions. Some people, like I said, are more comfortable doing things the Western way. And so some of them are just this way by nature, right? Obviously, we're all born with different personalities. And some people are more comfortable because they've had experience working with other cultures. Um, outsourcing, quote unquote, outsourcing is a very big industry in the Philippines, and a lot of people have experience. So my point is, hire those people. filter out everybody else. Don't hire the people who are going to give you all of this stuff. Any questions? Is this like stupidly obvious? Um, but yeah, I get it. I mean, the question is, how do you do that? Um, well, that would be that would be a question of what exactly do you how do you run a recruiting process, which is a topic for another day. You can learn about it and do it yourself, or you can work with a partner like Team Up. But you're never going to get anybody. You're It's too much to expect to think that you're going to hire someone who's has exactly your culture. So you still do, like, just if you hire the right person in your own country, you still do want to build, a good environment. You want to create a comfortable environment for feedback. You want to build a relationship and build trust over time. Um, and this is especially so when working with people in from other countries. One way of doing that is constantly give opportunities to provide input and to challenge you on the little things. Every day, ask them a question, right? And then if they give you input, actually implement it. It doesn't have to be every time, but you're teaching them that you take their comments seriously and will support them. And so if you do this over time, when there's a bigger deal, they're more likely to trust you and actually be forthright. Some logistical challenges, time zones, that's a big one. A lot of people have questions about this. And my recommendation is to choose 2 to 3 overlapping hours and let them choose their own hours for the rest of the day. So here on the West Coast, we're on Pacific time. My afternoon is their morning, and that works fantastically. We have 2 or 3 hours that we're always available, and then, you know, the rest of the time is up to them. Um, I've had some people ask me, well, how many hours do they work? Well, that's up to you, right? It's your job. You're hiring someone. Is this a full-time job? Is it not? Generally, everybody that we recruit for full-time roles primarily. And so that's 40 hours. And if you have a busy season, it's okay to put in the job description, right? Busy season, we expect this, but the rest of the time that. If you're on the East Coast, during the summer, it's exactly 12 hours time difference. And so they don't change their time. So now it's either 11 or 13 hours, and I forget exactly which way that goes. Um, had a little pop up here. New share. What is this? Can you all see my screen? Can you guys pop in the chat? I had something happen on my screen and it looks like now. Okay, good. Thank you, Marcy. Zoom. All right. Yes, logistical challenges. So, yeah, if you're on the East Coast, the best thing to do is to have them work late evening. And so let's say summertime when it's 12 hours difference. What you can do is have your 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. or whenever your morning starts, and have them work 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. That sounds late, and to you and me, that might sound like, ooh, I wouldn't want to do that. But frankly, that's actually very desirable for a lot of these people. And if that's the job that you advertise, the people who want that will apply for it. Those who don't won't. And you might get 70% of the total applicant pool who is interested in those hours. So that's pretty good still. Um, any questions at this point? I'm glad to see that the chat is working. Let me know if you have any questions. Power and internet outages. This is a common question, and I've heard some stories where there have been pretty serious issues. But like, if you're having more than a couple of times a month, it being like a full day or even 2 days, if you're getting this every week, there's something wrong with that. Yes, they do have typhoons, and sometimes there are power outages. It's a developing country, but they've come a long way in the last 5 or 10 years that I've been working with people over there, and I don't have the issues that I used to. So a couple times a month, maybe, or with a lot of people I work with, it's not even that. It's like once a year. Some of you know Lala on my team. She is in the Philippines, and I've been working with her for 8 months now. Her power and her internet has never been out. We've never once had an issue. So ask if they have backups. That's sometimes common. So yeah, again, like if you have real issues around that, like I think there's something else going on. Um, we're going over time, guys. I'm sorry we had some technical difficulties earlier. I hope it's all right. You can you can stay as long as you is if you're able. If you have to go, I'll understand. We This is being recorded, and I'll send the recording out afterward. So, yes, to start your relationship off right, you can ask a few questions during your offer call. And these are pretty simple questions, but these will short circuit potential challenges that may come and really ward off any misunderstandings. These are just three simple questions. One, can you commit full time, 40 hours per week, whatever it is, of your undivided attention? And that will set the tone. And if they say yes, that's great, right? If no, then like, oh my gosh, we've come, we we shouldn't be here, right? Because this is what we need. Um, the other question is this pay enough for your full-time income? Basically meaning, are you is this going to be able to feed your family, right? Are you going to have to go out and get other side jobs? Because if so, then we need to pay you more, and we need to know that. Because sometimes what I've seen people hiring, they don't really know what salary to offer. We went over salaries earlier. If you offer what I suggest, you're going to be fine. But sometimes people are like, I don't really know. And then they find out, I don't think work is getting done. And they find out later they have five other clients. And it's because, they've had to go out and get other jobs. But this is part of what we help people navigate. And then also just ask them about what they do in case of internet and power outages. Do they have a backup? How often does this happen? That sort of thing. All right. So we've been talking about all the details going into hiring and the importance of finding that right person. Now let's talk a bit about retaining your amazing new team. Anybody have any questions? I'm happy for questions. Um, all right. If you've done what we've discussed up to this point, the rest is so easy because I'll be serious, like to be just totally frank and transparent, like getting the right person is 85%, of having a successful long-term relationship. Um, but you do still need to onboard. We can help with onboarding. I don't have time to get into all of this. I do have an onboarding program that's available, but you want to share your vision, give them a reason to buy in, tell your story, explain your culture, your values, and all of that. And then that brings me to the question that I often get, which is, can you keep Filipino staff for the long term? Because so many people have heard all these stories on the internet about, Filipino staff staying around just for a few months and leaving and just constantly being on that treadmill, hamster wheel, um, of just constantly having to find and train people and then they leave. Um, but the people who tell those stories on the internet, they have not done any of the things that we've discussed so far today, right? That's why they're out there telling those stories. In my experience, Filipino staff is much, much more loyal than Americans. You cannot get an American to stay with you for more than 2 years, at least my generation and younger, right? We're out of there, man. Like, I don't want to put up with this working for you, right? I'm here for a year, two max, I'm gone, right? It's not the case with Filipinos. If they have a great opportunity with a good firm and you treat them well, you pay them well, they feel included, there's opportunity for growth, why would they leave? They don't, unless something in their life changes, right? So just as an example, here's my Summit team, our bookkeeping business. It's been 4 years and we've only had two people quit, and they've been for other reasons, right? So how can we help? Um, like I've been saying, there are great people out there. You just need to find them. You can have a DIY recruiting. You can do the recruiting on your own. You can go on the platforms. You can put your job out there and all of that. Or if you want to work with us, here's an offer that we have. Recruiting project, we charge $3,000 and then you never pay us again. But we hope you come back and do another recruiting project. That's going up to 4,000 in January. So if you want to get that current price, you have to do it before then. The onboarding program, I can tell you more about another time. It's pretty in depth. We do charge $1,000 for that. I'll give that to you for free. And we'll offer twice monthly calls with me. I don't have unlimited time, so I can only take the first 5 people, and we can have calls for 3 months to just to make sure things are going well. We do have a guarantee, and that is if it doesn't work out, you hire someone through us, doesn't work out, any reason at all, for 90 days, we'll find you a really great replacement. So I think this is a pretty good offer. Total $3,000. You save $3,000. So anyway, hope that's all right that I shared that with you. And now I'd be happy to open it up for questions. You guys have been very quiet so far, have had not many questions. So I hope you have some for me. You've stuck with me for this presentation. Type it into the chat, type it into the Q&A. What questions do you have about hiring in the Philippines? And while you're typing, what can I tell you about? I can tell you some more. I did breeze over some of these other things. Let's see, what else can I tell you about? Let's talk about this topic of employer of record versus contractor. Is this legal? I gave you the short version, yes. If you want to know more, I'll tell you more while you're typing your questions. By the way, this is recorded and I will send this out later on. And I appreciate you all being here. So yes, contractor. So let's give a little bit more nuance to what I said earlier. People are concerned about employment regulations and whatnot. And yeah, I think it's good to treat people well. Oh, Lisa, can you tell us the name of the IT company I recommend? Yes, yes. Tech for Accountants, right here. Tech, the number 4 accountants. Whoops, whoops, whoops. Oh, hi, Lisa. I clicked the button. Yeah, Tech for Accountants. I think it's tech, the number 4 accountants.com. And yeah, any more questions? Pop it in the chat or the Q&A box. But back to this contractor question. Yeah, they do want to follow the rules legally, do everything by the book, right? Yeah, so the Philippines, like all countries, has employment labor laws and regulations. Um, but those are for people who are employed. Um, a contractor is a contractor. And again, it's not legal advice. I can't speak with total legal authority, but yeah, working with someone as a contractor, I mean, it's basically what you expect. And I do know that some people will say, yeah, but what about, like here in the US, if I'm having, there's, if I'm having someone work full time, I'm telling them what to do, they're using my equipment, right? There are some checks that the IRS and the regulating bodies look at to determine whether this person is legally an employee or not, right? And they'll come after you. Um, yeah, I think they probably have something similar in the Philippines, but again, I can't say this enough. It's not legal advice. It's just my opinion that is, I think, rather well informed. Um, yeah, but it's an international contract, right? Who has jurisdiction over that contract? Um, my view is I treat people really well. I want that's the you have to. If you don't treat people really, really well, they're gonna leave. And then what was the point of any of this, right? And but also like it's the right thing to do and it's enjoyable and it's fun when you have a thriving team that you're treating well. Um, so yeah, treat people well. If you treat people well, everything's gonna be good. I don't necessarily need the regulators to tell me, how to treat people well. Um, especially through an international contract, right? So, um, I'd love to have any questions on that topic or others. Do you have any yeah buts? If you're listening to me and you're going, yeah, but what about this? What about that? Um, Happy to take questions. All right. Let's see. Any other details that I can tell go over? I think that's computer questions. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I think with that, unless if there are no other, okay, Corey says, maybe I missed it. Can you provide an employer of record to use? Yeah, there's a whole bunch of companies that do this. Um, you yeah, I can make an introduction to you. So I have your email address. I'll email you about that later on. Um, any other questions about that? I know it takes a minute to type. But yeah, seriously, finding the right person, hiring the right person in the first place. This is my mantra, you know. People say, how do you retain people for the long term? Well, I think what become before that question, you should ask, do you have the right person in the first place? Um, because if you have the wrong person, what's the point of retaining them long term? It's not going to work out. Um, any other questions? All right. Thank you, everybody. This has been fun. And thanks for sticking with me through the technical challenges that we've had. Um, I'm a Zoom webinar newbie, but we got it. Have a fantastic day, a fantastic holiday season. And oh, thank you, Lisa. You're very welcome. If you have any questions at all, you can reach me at my email address, Isaac. There's one S and two A's at hireteamup.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn and hope to talk with you soon. Bye, everybody.